Fantastic. So we're talking about a topic today which I think the importance of which can't be overstated. Cybersecurity, the new business realities, right? I'm not a lawyer, although after hearing the panel previously today talk about the first-year law programs, the summer programs, I'm thinking about maybe going to law school. Prior to joining K2 Intelligence, where I work now, and I do proactive cybersecurity work, I was a special agent with the FBI in New York doing national security investigations for energy, transportation, and finance. So I worked very closely with lawyers, and I continue to do so today in my role at K2 Intelligence. And I'm joined today by two fantastic panelists with an incredible breadth of experience and tremendous accomplishments in years. Directly to my right is David. David is a partner at Morrison and Foerster and has nearly 30 years of experience to bring to the table today. And to his right is Ron, and Ron is the Vice President and General Counsel in-house at eHarmony, and he brings 28 years of experience. So I'm really looking forward to what you guys have to talk about today. I think we can all agree that the landscape that we deal with in technology has changed vastly, especially in the last few years. It's really, the pace of progress is incredible, and that pace continues to accelerate. It's hard to believe that just in 2007, the first iteration of the iPhone was released. And now with that technology being so ubiquitous, has really changed how we share information and work, both personally and in our business lives. So I'd like to start out, first of all, with the panel and ask both of you gentlemen the question, from in-house and outside counsel perspective, how has the role of an attorney in this field changed and morphed over the last few years?
Well, from my perspective, I'm an in-house counsel, as indicated. Cybersecurity has really been developing almost logarithmically because the attacks, as everybody knows, have been also developing logarithmically. It's gotten so sophisticated and so many people are involved with it now, both the hackers as well as the people trying to defend against the hacks. And it's a very challenging area, whereas a few years back it was something that was really a CSO or CISO or CTO type issue. It's becoming more and more, I think, almost primarily a GC responsibility as I see it. Now at eHarmony we're a small law department. I mean, we've got a big brand, but we're a small company. We only have about 200 employees, and we only have 2 people in the law department. So as GC there, I really have to be responsible for overseeing and implementing our cybersecurity policy. And in order for me to do that, I have to spend a great deal of time familiarizing myself with what's out there. So I'm an avid reader of everything that comes up, and I spend quite a bit of time speaking with outside counsel who specialize in this area in order for myself to get up to speed on the issues. It's coming from a litigation background, I was a litigator for 28 years, and coming from a litigation background, my mindset is always everything may ultimately end in litigation. So how are we going to structure this, and what are we going to do to make sure we avoid litigation? That's my mindset. So I really got to be on top of what's going on in that regard.
Great. David, I wonder if you could add your perspective from outside counsel?
Sure. It's changed pretty dramatically in the last, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. I mean, if you look at all the surveys that have been done of general counsels over the number one issue for the last 4 years on their mind is cyber threats, cybersecurity. What are we going to do? So it has gone from, I think correctly, from that's the techie's problem. It's not my problem. To sort of front and center. And certainly the amount of publicity that one breach a few years ago got has caused boards of directors to summon in general counsels, CISOs, CTOs, chief privacy officers, the CEO, and say, what are we doing? What are you thinking about? What are you worried about? How are you protecting us from this issue? So, the change in mindset has been, sort of astronomical. And people think about cybersecurity events in terms of the big front page breaches that you read about, Yahoo, Home Depot, Target, whatever it is. But very few, a very small percentage of breaches involve reportable information. So the large number of breaches that are going on every day across corporate America don't have to be disclosed. I mean, the disclosure obligations are fairly limited and fairly circumscribed under state law. And so the notion that there's just these few big events out there that people seem to have is sort of in the popular press. This is all only an issue occasionally. No, it's a problem every day. And there are attacks going on. There are attacks going on against companies that are succeeding. There are attacks that are going on that the technical folks are defeating. But it's a very interactive process that is going on right now. And so it's much more than I think meets the eye. Right?
You raise a fantastic point, which is keeping track of notification issues and dealing with, what you do or what the company's responsibilities are in the event of a breach. And I often hear from clients that one of the major risks that they deal with or something that they consider a risk of business operations is the regulatory environment and the rapidly changing and vastly diverse regulatory environment. You alluded to the different state laws. So I wonder, David, if you could give us some pointers or some ideas, thoughts on how you are keeping up with the rapidly changing regulatory requirements and making sure that your clients are meeting those and keeping abreast of them.
Or knowing when we aren't meeting them.
Yeah.
Not always. Sometimes meeting them isn't really an option.
Mm-hmm.
For any firm that's in this space, and seriously in this space, they should have, we have a data set of every state law requirement, what has to be disclosed, what doesn't have to be disclosed. We go further because we work in this space across the globe. We maintain a global privacy data set. We're the chair or organizer of the Global Privacy Initiative that is a group of 40 major multinational companies that worry about these issues and then advocate sort of for a sensible interpretation and handling of the issues. But, it is just a process of continually updating, figuring out, West Virginia just changed the rules. We got to change we have to know what we're doing here. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's not that hard because you pull out the statute, you know what it says, you read the regulatory guidance, you know what the regulators in that state think, you know what Massachusetts is going to require you to publish in these 3 newspapers and whatever else they want to do. I think the real problem area right now for companies is what's the FTC thinking? What's the SEC thinking? Is the DOT going to jump in if you're in the transportation space? Is the FCC going to jump in if you have something in their space? How do you navigate all of the different regulatory regimes, most of which are completely unwritten and subject to the whims of lawyers with not a lot of experience in some of those departments who are making it up as they go along? And so that's the place where I think the real confusion, risk, disquiet of general counsels ought to be. It's certainly where the disquiet is in when I think about these issues. And so I think that's really the regulatory world that frightens me at the moment.
For sure. And Ron, I wonder, interested to hear your take, but as well, from the in-house counsel perspective, what are some of the other main obstacles that you're finding in balancing managing risk and business operations? And a follow-up to that, which we can maybe get to, is something that I'm curious about as a technologist, as a person who is more of a subject matter expert in the technology itself. Do you still find that there's a large dichotomy between, or a conflict between efficiency and security?
Well, to answer your first question, I think one of the main obstacles, and I think this would be common to any business, is cost, because you're always trying to balance, how much you're spending on cybersecurity with how much you want to spend on marketing, for example, or other areas of the business. So I think over the years, it's changed because, the pendulum's swinging more towards cybersecurity with all that's going on right now. So I know we're certainly spending more on cybersecurity than we did in the past. And of course, we have to. We have to be on top of that. I'm not really sure how to answer your second question, but I can tell you that I'm always, I get a lot of news feeds. I get a lot of legal feeds, and I'm always educating myself as to what else we need to do so I can ask our tech people the appropriate questions so we can balance what we're doing. But my tech people will come to me and say, hey, Ron, we need this new software, we need that new software, and I'll talk to them about it. I'll ask them how much it costs, what we need to do, and we'll talk to the CEO, and if necessary, we'll go to the board for permission to spend some additional money, and they'll always grant it. But I'm not sure if I answered your second question.
No, that's interesting. And, I think the process that you just described is, maybe we drill into that a little bit. So how often does that conversation happen? I mean, it's good to hear that you have this team and this communications between, the technologists, the security professionals that are bringing to you, proposing to you maybe some ideas. What does that team look like? How often does that happen? And how are those decisions made on what to implement and what not to?
Well, at eHarmony, we have basically three divisions that deal with cybersecurity 24/7. We have our security operations, we have our trust and safety department, and we have our engineering department. And I deal with all those people daily. I mean, we have each other's cell phones. We have lunch together probably once a week because we're all friends. And it's very important to keep the communications and lines going. SecOps will implement all of our cybersecurity protections. I mean, for example, like our database segregation and the firewall and the web application firewall and the database layering, and the logging and so forth. And so I need to be on top of that. I need to understand what's going on. If there's some new area that they're interested in, they'll talk to me about it, and I'll talk to our CEO about it. Trust and safety is another department we have that deals with fraudsters and potential issues of that nature. We've got some very sophisticated business rules that we have whereby we'll screen people for, certain IP addresses, for example, or certain buzzwords that to us, based on our experience, indicate there's some type of fraud going on. Or for example, we've got an algorithm that will look at the way you answer questions, and if going down our list, and we have quite a long list of questions, somewhere down the list you answer a question that indicates a different type of personality, it'll throw a red flag up, and it'll have our people look into that. And if there's any issues, they'll come to me and we'll talk about it. If we want to tweak the business rules, we can do that. Then, of course, engineering works on all the actual application-based issues. But I think we find that, one of the biggest areas where we're attacked is we get these DDoS, which is distributed denial of service bot attacks constantly. And they're becoming more and more prevalent. You see them in the news all the time. And luckily, we were able to stop them. But what these things do is they slow our system down. And so, they'll get a hold of me and we'll start talking about it and so forth. And I think one thing that I need to do is make sure, and I've gone over this with all of our people, and that is that any issue relating to cybersecurity, I want to be on the distribution on the list in an attempt to try to preserve any attorney-client privilege that I can. I don't want two tech people talking outside about something that's, potentially not attractive. I want to be on that list so we can talk about it and at least attempt to claim attorney-client privilege on that, and I can coordinate everything, because that's something that GC really needs to do. They really need to be involved from day one with regard to anything, even a DDoS bot attack, yeah, I want to know what's going on so we can immediately coordinate what our response is.
That's great. And while we're on the topic of response, before we move on, David, I wonder your take, outside counsel in the event of a, some kind of an attack or an identified breach. At what point do you recommend companies bring in that outside counsel? Ron just mentioned that the general counsel needs to be on that list of people that you call in the event that something's going on. Should outside counsel be included in that incident response list? And at what point in that hierarchy, at what point in that timeline do you think it's appropriate to bring them in?
I do think outside counsel should be on the incident response list. Is there a materiality level? Probably. Where that is varies dramatically given the company and the risks. But I do think certainly elevating it to the legal department immediately, I mean, that should be part of the step, and then let the legal department decide, is this something we need to get to outside counsel, or can we wait a little while, see how this plays out? If it's a security incidents, most security incidents are we caught something and nothing happened. Mm-hmm. You don't need to call me. Mm-hmm. Right. Call the GC, let them know you've stopped it. You can do a lessons learned. You can do some of the other incident analysis that comes from that. But if there's been a breach, and certainly if it's more than just, data breaches range from, I left my laptop on the bus, to the hackers came in and we only found out about it 3 months after the fact because the Secret Service called and said, we're seeing some activity we don't think is right. So there's a lot of different things that go into play in that analysis. But I think it's, if all things being equal, you err on the side of caution and make the phone call and see where it goes. And I think one of the things you mentioned, and I think is the most important part of this, is having an incident response plan. Having worked through the incident response plan, have done some tabletops, have done some exercises, so that when the incident occurs, the first reaction isn't, oh shit, where's that? We have a plan, I gotta find it. Yeah. And all of the things that go along with that. I mean, in this day and age, if you don't have an incident response plan, frankly, the FTC is going to look at you and say, your security was per se unreasonable, and you've breached our, what we view as your obligations. So I think is that, you have to have a plan. Well, now you're going to have to start working the plan, tabletops and the other exercises that go along with it. Is it the whole team you have to have, work through? Yes. Should you have a tabletop with the senior management? Yes. Do you want to have a presentation to the board about what their role is going to be? You get to advise on big issues, but you are not going to be running incident response. And there are board members out there who think in a breach that that's their job. And so having all of those conversations in advance so everybody knows what their role is going to be, what their duties are, and who's going to make the calls. One of the things we have in these conversations all the time is you hear, well, we're a really consensus-driven company. And so we're going to get in the room and we're all going to make these decisions. No, you aren't. Because decisions are going to have to get made on incomplete information, and you're going to have to do the best you can, and somebody has to be tasked with those decisions. You can't have everybody in the room saying, well, let's wait and see what happens. It just doesn't work. And so having clear identified roles and responsibilities is vital in this exercise.
And that's why really the GC needs to be involved absolutely from the ground level up, because the GC is the one who has to know the law, who has to put together the cyber response plan, and again, in conjunction with the CTO and the CISO and so forth. But I mean, I have to know what the law is in order to be able to have some kind of a cogent plan that's going to work. I mean, when to escalate to outside counsel. I mean, you have to know what the definition of a data breach is, and that varies from state to state. I mean, we have 47 states now that have a data breach law, and they're all different. And, 3 states are probably the most stringent, which would be, California, New York, and I think North Dakota of all places. But you have to understand that law so you know when to pick up the phone and call outside counsel, or when to pick up the phone and perhaps call the FBI. I've established a relationship with our local FBI agent in Westwood there in the federal building next to us. And I think it's really critical to have, colloquy and a good working relationship and know when you need to get a hold of these guys when it's elevated to that level. Thankfully, we haven't had any since I've been there. I've been elevated to the level where I think I need to contact the FBI. But we've met with the FBI. We've had them come in and give us talks about what they're seeing in the dating space about fraud and fraudsters, and we look for those things internally. But it's really as I see it, it's really a general counsel thing, because the buck stops at my desk. If everything goes to hell in a handbasket, I'm the one who's going to have to go to the board and explain what happened. I'm the one who's going to have to sit down and work out a press release with our PR people that puts us in a favorable light. I'm the one who's going to have to decide when I'm going to report it, what's going to be in the report, how I'm going to phrase it. And again, it's going to depend on each state. And we've got a big spreadsheet of the laws in the various states too. But if it ever gets to that level, I would be working with outside counsel on it.
Well, just one other thing. I would put one other person on the list. Almost every U.S. Attorney's Office in a major district in the country has an AUSA who is the liaison on cyber. And that's another person that I think you should know your local cyber AUSA, because there are going to be questions that are going to come up, and you may need FBI's assistance. You may need you may need the U.S. Attorney's Office assistance. You may need to craft subpoenas and search warrants for those folks to give them what you want to give them in a way that's protected from full disclosure. And so having a good relationship in advance with somebody who's going to be your hometown AUSA is also important.
Yeah, I could tell you we do have an AUSA on our list. I've personally never met with him or dealt with him before. Hopefully I won't have to. But that's very important. And I know the attorneys that we work with, if we were to escalate it to that level, have a very good relationship with this particular AUSA. So that's a very important point.
That's great. So have a plan, practice that plan, test that plan, make the connections before the event so that you know who to call. I would also include redundancies, right? Make sure that you have, in my experience with incident response, you're going down that call list, and oftentimes somebody's on vacation, right? Or somebody's left the company, So having redundancies in that communication chain is huge. So, it's one thing to be able to react efficiently and confidently, right? And compress that timeline from event to recovery or mitigation. It's an entirely different thing to work proactively, to do what you can to mitigate the risks, the exposures, and understand the threats against your particular company. So Ron, I wondered if you could share, some of the things that you're doing as in-house counsel to help facilitate that process. I'm sure at eHarmony, being a leading technology company, you have a fantastic security team who is doing that on the security side, and you talked about, sharing indicators with the FBI and the like. But I wonder, are you involved in that process at all? And is there a separate process, being counsel, that you're looking at to be proactive as in-house counsel?
Well, as I indicated, the first step is having a really, really good understanding of what cybersecurity is and what you need to do to protect the company. And the only way you get there is, again, by reading, by speaking with your tech guys. And I'm very blessed to have fantastic tech guys at eHarmony, because it's a tech company. So these guys are already in this. And so they love explaining to me what it's all about. And as I said, we sit down, I'll have lunch with these guys at least once a week, actually, and we're just friends. And so we go through all that, and I understand those things. And as a result of that, that's starting the process of enabling me to prepare an appropriate cyber response plan. But I guess the key is really understanding what you have and knowing what you need. As I indicated, we have all those things, and we have a lot more things from from a network access standpoint, and of course from a user access standpoint. We developed the two-factor authentication that we use, and endpoint security and so forth, and we have procedures in case something is lost and so forth. So I guess the answer to your question is we just need to really understand what's going on, and then when you do, everything kind of flows from there. I mean, I can give you more particulars. I'm not sure that would be necessarily beneficial to everybody, but the key is understanding what's out there and how you deal with it, and having a very good relationship with all the various departments in your company that deal with these issues, and making sure you've got what you need to address what you anticipate may come your way.
We were all excited to hear how you were tuning Tanium to look at network flows. Sorry.
Not quite.
But I mean, I agree. I mean, whether it's the GC in a smaller or small department, or a lawyer who's responsible for that aspect of the company's business in a larger legal department, the best thing for the legal department to be engaged on is just knowing what the tech team is worried about, focused on, what they're doing. Just because if you get in that regular conversation about what it is the company's doing, where the tech people think the next set of challenges are going to be, what's the intelligence they're hearing from others in the business, from the various technical publications they're reading and following, where are we going, what things do I need to be worried about? Cyber has been the big issue for the last 3 years. As of last Friday, Internet of Things hopped over cyber to become the cyber of Internet of Things issues because of the DDoS attacks running through cameras and all the other tools that the criminals weaponized to run that attack. So, all these issues are simply, you got to be spending time with the tech folks, just understanding what's out there.
Yeah, just yesterday, for example, I was speaking with one of our head techies. We were sitting on the balcony of our company, and we were talking. He goes, Ron, I saw something that I think is kind of an internal weakness. It's not that big of a deal, but I really think that we ought to look into it. And he explained to me what it was, and he told me about a particular software that he thinks could address that. And so I'm looking into it. We're discussing it more. Along the lines of having the general counsel understand what's going on. Again, it's so critical to read just what's out in the papers. I mean, even in the LA Times or the New York Times, for example. Must have been about 8 months ago that Snapchat had a phishing scheme, a spear phishing scheme, where somebody, some hacker, wrote in and wrote an email to the head of HR. The hacker purported to be the president or the CEO of Snapchat, and said, "Hey, I'm doing a salary review. Can you send me the W-2s of all employees?" And HR sent them all out without thinking. And I just was lucky. I happened to read that article, and the next morning I went to the office and I immediately put together an email to all employees saying, look out for this, because this is a problem that's going around. And sure enough, and I'm just lucky that it turned out this way, but sure enough, 2 days later, we got an identical attack. Identical. I got an email, or actually our accounting department got an email which purported to be from Neil Clark Warren, who was the CEO and chairman of the board of the company. That's the gentleman you see in all the TV commercials. And it said, "I'm doing a salary review. Can you please send me the W-2s for all the employees?" And so the accounting department immediately contacted me and said, "Oh my gosh, Ron, I think this is what you were talking about." I said, "Yes, it is what I'm talking about." And boy, was I lucky that I put that email out there. But it's so critical just to read everything you can read. And these things continue to this day, and they get more sophisticated. What they've done recently is they're sending around emails basically that appear to be from a tech company. And again, this is all social engineering. What these guys do is they'll study your Facebook, they'll study your social media, they'll see how you work, they'll see what organizations you're a member of, and they'll put together something that looks very compelling. And I got an email from someone from a very tech-sounding company, And it said, sorry, we sent you the incorrect invoice yesterday, correct invoice attached, we apologize. And it looked like something we'd get, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, I don't think I want to click on that attachment, because that attachment could plant malware on my machine. And so I immediately contacted our tech guys, and they confirmed that, yes, do not open that. And I sent an email out to every employee saying, we're getting these things, do not click on anything that looks like it's an invoice or somebody telling you you forgot something, please click here. These guys are really sophisticated, and they look very, very legitimate, but they're not. And so you just have to be on top of things to make sure that you don't get hit, because once you click on one of those things, they're gone.
No, it's a great point. And, the kind of social engineering attacks that you're both illustrating here are unbelievably, lucrative for these criminal actors. I mean, the FBI has put out statistics about what they call the business email compromise. And business email compromise is a similar type of attack where, someone sends you an email, a spoofed email, and asks you to wire transfer some money overseas. And, the storyline behind that can vary. But this is to the effect of, $2 or $3 billion over the last 3 or so years. So just imagine the resources that a criminal has given that kind of payday.
Yeah, it's an amazing way to make money. I was talking to our local FBI agent at a little presentation he did a few weeks back, and he said the average bank heist nets you about $3,500, but the average BEC is just completely, way out there. It's so much more lucrative to do it that way, and it's very hard to get caught. So it's what these guys are using.
Well, and that doesn't even require you to be compromised. I'm working on one that happened last week. Client got a email that was from an address that was a customer, saying, or a vendor, we've changed our banking relationships. Here's our new bank account. All future payments should go to this address. Sent off $180,000 payment. The vendor called up and said, hey, how come you haven't paid? We sent you the payment. Here's your email. Here's what we did. Well, it wasn't the company's email system that was compromised. It was the vendor. And so, all the good planning that Ron did with his client goes down the tubes if you get them an email that looks perfectly appropriate. It's not spoofed. It's not from some unknown vendor. Someone else has been compromised, and they're redirecting your payments to them.
Yeah, they can hack into your email system or an outside email system and get an actual legitimate email address, and you think it's legit. More often, though, it seems that what they do is they'll get an email address that's very, very close to the email address you're expecting to see, and you look at it and you just kind of glaze at it quickly and say, okay, that looks legitimate. But it's very scary, and the thing to do is very old-fashioned. I mean, when you get a request like that, just pick up the phone and call whoever sent it and say, you know what, did you just send me this request? Do you really want me to wire this money to this account? And it's even better if the person's in your building, just to walk down the hallway and say, hey, I just got this email from you. Because I forgot who I was talking to recently, but it was another person in law enforcement, and they said a lot of times these people will even call you, and they've learned how to spoof the person who's supposed to be the sender, how to imitate their voice. And they'll call you on the phone and say, hey, I'm sending you an email now. I need you to wire this money, and you think it's legitimate. So it's a very scary thing. So I guess, beware. It's a very scary area, and it's getting more and more sophisticated.
These are all great points, and I think when we think about the risk exposure of a law firm, particularly, we're illustrating things that make them uniquely vulnerable, right? The fact that think about how many vendors you use, how many third parties you use for various things, for business operations, and then the clients. I mean, a compromise at any one of those places could lead to a compromise in-house, and the distribution of materials of the client data, of data in general. How we talked earlier in a panel about the mobility of lawyers, and using laptops and smart devices. We talked about Internet of Things. So these are all current threats, and going off the topic from last week, the distributed denial of service attack. Internet of Things, smart devices, refrigerators, and Wi-Fi enabled light bulbs and that kind of a thing. These technologies being leveraged by criminal actors to affect attacks downrange and break the internet, which is what essentially they did on Friday. Forward thinking, I mean, most people agree that, the estimates are within about 3 years, the number of devices on the internet will outnumber the number of people on this planet by 7 to 1, right? Unbelievable. And when you think about that as an attack surface, right, trying to hide among the weeds, right, as an adversary becomes incredibly easy. Troubles with attributing those attacks become incredibly difficult. So if you don't mind, I'd like to look to the future a little bit, thinking about where we're going. I thought I was getting the hook there. I still have 1 minute and 20 seconds. What are your clients, David, thinking about in terms of the future? What are they worried about? What are the attacks that they're thinking about, and how are you preparing?
Well, right now it's Internet of Things. Internet of Things, Internet of Things, and Internet of Things. Because systems have the ability to, your network has the ability to be incredibly secure. You still have people who are using it and they're going to screw it up. But your system, you can have there are great tools out there. But most of your refrigerator has a little chip in it. It may be pre-programmed. You may be able to push software updates to it. But vulnerabilities there are long-term. They are, they are not nearly as capable of being dealt with over time. And so I think that's where everybody's panicking right now. Because at the end of the day, all these new really exciting technologies, autonomous cars, drones, all those things, all depend on all of us being comfortable with them. And they're all protected by less than robust security systems that we would look at it on on eHarmony's computer network and say, no, we got to buy some more security tools because we are not protected. But right now, that's where we are.
I echo Dave's sentiments. I mean, you only know what we can know right now, and certainly IoT is a big area of concern. But the only way you really we can't predict the future because technology is changing so fast. Law is way behind the technology, and will always be way behind the technology. It's just given the nature of technology. So all you can do is read everything you can get your hands on that relates to technology and cybersecurity in order to be able to ask your tech people and ask your lawyers the right questions as to what I should be worried about next. What do you think is coming down the pipe? Because, at the end of the day, I'm just a lawyer. I'm not a tech guy, but it's important for me to know as much tech as I could possibly know as a GC. So read.
Great. And with that, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation about an incredibly important topic. So thank you for sharing your expertise and experience with us today. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. And I think Dave sort of alluded to how important it is to get to know your local U.S. attorney. And so we wanted to make that possible. And so we're very honored to have our closing keynote interview with, we're going to have Edward Peterson interview U.S. Attorney Eileen Decker. So we'll give them a moment to get set up and we'll get started.